Hey everyone, welcome to this lecture. So in this lecture, we are going to discuss regarding the IP route redistribution. So redistribution is an important topic. So where in case of any sort of routing environment, you will need route redistribution from one autonomous system to another autonomous system to exchange certain routes that you must be requiring in your AS to communicate with. So let's talk about the basic points of route redistribution, and then we will take it ahead, okay, with the configuration aspect on your Palo Alto firewalls. So let's talk about IP route redistribution overview. So I'm not discussing with respective to Cisco or anything else, but on a generic point, if anyone asks you what is IP route redistribution, what do you mean by that, let's talk about this, right? So first is what is route redistribution. So what is route redistribution? Okay, so you can say that route redistribution is basically it's a process of sharing the routes. So you can say it's a process of sharing the routes between different routing protocols. Example, it could be OSPF, it could be EIGRP, it could be RIP, it could be BGP, right, etc. Okay, or you can say between static and also dynamic routes. So this allows multi, or you can say multi-protocol networks to communicate with each other. Okay, so you might have one region where you're running let's say OSPF, you might have another region where you're running, let us say BGP or EIGRP, or might be a default routing. Okay, so for example, you can see right here in our scenario itself, if you can look into that. So you're running OSPF on the inside zone, right? So the OSPF is running on the inside zone and it is running in area 0, and you are not running OSPF over here, but let's say you're not running OSPF over here. Let's say you are running default routing. So you are running default routing to reach to the world of internet. Okay, so you've got a default route via the edge router to reach to the world of internet. Now you know that the inside router cannot communicate to the outside router right now, because the routes are missing. So what you can do it by virtue of redistribution on this particular Palo Alto firewall, you can allow that particular static default route which you have configured on the Palo Alto firewall to be redistributed into your OSPF process. Okay, so the static default route what you have configured on the PA firewall will be redistributed in the OSPF process, and because of which there will be a redistributed route which will be there inside your inside routing table, and because of which the communication can happen now from inside to the edge router. Okay, so let's see that in action. You can also do a redistribution of any other routing protocol. Let's say you might run EIGRP here, might be, sorry, EIGRP is not supported on PA. So let's say you're running RIP over here, RIP between the PA firewall to the edge router, or might be running BGP between the PA firewall to the edge router, and you want to do redistribution of the BGP routes into your OSPF, right? Or might be vice versa, the OSPF routes into BGP. Okay, that you can do if you want it. Okay, so in case, let's say right now, if you can look into my scenario over here, so if I look into the PA firewall 1, if I look into the more runtime stats, or let's say I go to the default virtual router, I go to the OSPF process, look into my area ID interface configuration, on the Ethernet 1/2, which is the outside interface, let's remove OSPF process completely. Okay, so let's click on Ethernet 1/2. Let's delete that OSPF process completely from the interface. So I'm running OSPF only on Ethernet 1/1. That is my inside interface. My loopback interface is on my PA. Okay, looks good as of now. So, and look, regarding my static route, so I have got a static default route configured. We can see that the interface is the outgoing interface is Ethernet 1/2, and over my next hop is 123.111, which is the IP of my edge router, right? So via the outside interface, with the next hop of the edge router, I'm having a default route configured. Okay, so what I need right now is a redistribution stuff, right? So I want to redistribute that default route into my OSPF process to happen, so that my inside router will learn that default route. So if I currently look for the routing table, show IP route, on the inside router I don't have any default route which got redistributed over here. Okay, so let's go to my PA firewall. Let's click on the default route, the default virtual router, and let's you can click on the redistribution profile here. Okay, and you can add a redistribution profile. Make sure it's IPv4 selected. Yeah, and make sure you give a name. So you're doing redistribution of default route. Let's say I'll do it like that, right? Redistribute default route. Priority, you can define a value as 1. And what should be the source that you're trying to redistribute into? So my source is basically that static default route. Yep, so nothing else. Okay, and make sure you select as redistribute over here, redistribute. Okay, click on OK there. So click on OSPF, click on export rule, ensure that you allow redistribute route default route. So this is selected in the export rule over here. All right, looks good. Okay, and you can add that particular redistribute profile which you have created. The default type is external type 2. If you want any tag, you can do that. If you want to add any metric value, you can do that, but let me keep it as default. So I am on the export rule of the OSPF configuration. I'm adding that redistribute default route profile which I've created earlier. So click on OK there. Let's go and commit the changes. Let the commit process complete successfully, and then we will do the testing. So the configuration got committed successfully. So let's click on close, and if you look into the inside router now, so looking at the inside router with so there is an update which took place, because of which show IP route completely, and now you can see that you've got a default route from OSPF process. The type is external type 2. That's the AD value of 110. That's the default metric. That's the next hop, and so on. So now, because of which if I try to reach now, ping to 99 with source of 11, that will not work out. The reason because I'm not, or this edge router don't know about this inside network. We're looking at the edge router. Do show IP route regarding 11 or 111. There is no route over here. Okay, so because of which, let's say I just add a static route just for the ping to happen. So IP route, let's say it's 11 /32 route. I'm adding only this specific route via 123.1.1.201. okay, so do show IP route static. I have that static route added now. So let's go to the inside router. Let's try to ping it once again. Now it's working fine. Okay, so I hope it is clear the point of redistribution. Let's wrap it up with some important keynotes. so you can also have those key points with you whenever you are in need of it, right? So next point would be, so let's say this is point number 1, what is route redistribution. My point number 2 would be how route redistribution works. If the question is that, so you may answer like a router running multiple routing protocols can act as a redistribution point. So in our case, the Palo Alto firewall was a redistribution point. Okay, it takes the routes from one protocol and injects them into another. Okay, third one, since different protocols use different metrics, manual metric conversion is required sometimes. Okay, so based on network design environment, you would need that. Okay, so example could be if a router runs both OSPF and EIGRP, it can redistribute OSPF routes into EIGRP and vice versa. Good. So what are the common route distribution scenarios that you might have? So I can have step number 3, common route redistribution. I should say red. Okay, redistribution scenarios that you can think of. So it is a scenario 1 would be where you can think of redistributing OSPF routes into EIGRP, right? Second point is redistribute EIGRP routes into OSPF, or sometimes it is also called as mutual redistribution. Okay, common scenarios are redistributing static routes into OSPF. That's one of the common scenarios. Okay, and also you will find redistributing BGP routes into OSPF. Okay, so yep, so I hope these points are clear. So when you work with Cisco routers, I would just give you a best practice points. So let's say best practice for route redistribution. When you specifically work with Cisco devices or any sort of routing gears, let's say routing devices like Cisco, Juniper and all, best practices would be to use something called as route maps. Okay, route maps to control which routes are required for redistribution, right? So it is not always required for redistributing every routes into a protocol. So you have to use redistribution techniques, where by using route maps you can just call that specific routes which has to be redistributed only. Okay, you have to set appropriate metrics to avoid something called as suboptimal routing. Okay, so make sure that the chosen metric is fine enough so that the routers are not having any sort of suboptimal routing or taking a bad routing path. You can use the concept of route tagging It is very important, and it is used to prevent any sort of routing loops. Okay, route tagging is that method. Wherever it is required, I should say, minimize two-way based redistribution, or you can say mutual redistribution. So whenever you do mutual redistribution, you will find a lot of problems occurring, okay, unless necessary, right? And the other point is, you can verify with show IP route or show IP, for example, right? Use show IP route or specific to OSPF, use show IP OSPF database commands to verify the redistributed routes. Okay, so I hope these points are clear. I hope you can practice now, and thank you for joining. I'll see you in the next lecture.